Be respectful and professional with people you want to work with. I wouldn't have everyone in this video if I didn't handle myself carefully. When asking someone you don't know to work with you, get to the point. Although someone can be a legend, they're still a normal person. Don't pester them. Once you get in a crew, turn in your work on time and don't leak. Getting on a show is exciting and it might be hard to keep info to yourself at first, but word travels fast and that could give you a bad reputation. Don't risk it. Keep yourself in check and you can make it far.
Working on an object show doesn't always have to be a one-man job, and while you don't need 200 different people working on your project all at once, it's important that you have a team helping you out along the way. Personally, I found that burnout is way easier to fall into when you're working with a limited amount of contributors, as the amount of content to produce can become overwhelming when you're the only one taking the brunt of the workload. Now you're probably wondering how to find people, and the answer is easy. Branching out and applying to work on different object shows really helps out when you're looking to schmooze and make connections. I know I've met some of my closest friends and best employees by volunteering on other people's shows.
When reaching out to someone to work on your show, clarity is always key. If you just start out your message with a hi, especially if it's someone you don't know, it usually turns people away from responding. Try to be specific in your message and make sure to always be polite.
This can apply to any project you do, but if you want to make an object show and want it to release, you want to try and keep your scope in check. I've seen people over the years try to make these grand shows with a billion characters and gimmicks and crazy animation that just can't make it to the finish line because they burnt out. I'm no stranger to that problem either. You want to make sure you have the bandwidth to actually make your ideas a reality, so don't be afraid to slim your show down to make it happen. Cutting your cast down, trimming your script a bit, and refraining from flexing your animation skills the whole episode could be the thing that keeps you motivated to push out the next part.
Handling large-scale projects on your own can easily become overwhelming. I found it easier to manage a project this size by breaking it into parts and highlighting the most stressful pieces. I then take a look at my time between now and the due date and lay out a timeline for when I should complete each piece of the project, front-loading the stressful tasks. As a huge procrastinator myself, this method has helped my workload to go from something like this to something a lot more manageable. In the inevitable event that you do procrastinate a bit from your schedule, at least your workload will look a tad more structured compared to what you had before.
Save your files. What? Save your files! You don't have to deal with losing what you make right after you make it. That's like less meaty. Look, all you gotta do is press the save button or Control S or whatever your program is. I don't know. Whatever you got, it's easy. Adobe Animate users. Adobe Animate has an auto recovery feature. If you feel like you misplaced your original files, very likely that the one with the recover in the name is the one you're looking for. But not only should you save your files, you need to make sure you back them up just in case. I suggest saving backup files to an external drive if you're on a computer. Sometimes you can recover FLAs by importing SWFs. But if you don't want to get one of those, Google Drive is safe, online, and a really good way to archive any type of file.
If you're using Discord for your show, my biggest production tip is to let your whole team see all the work channels. Sometimes I'll join a crew as a voice actor and only ever see like general and the voice acting channel, like the others locked away. No! Being able to see all the notes and processes of every other task in the show helps everyone else in the pipeline have an easier ability to see the vision of the project, seeing all the tweaks and changes made along the way. Everyone in your production is an artist, so being able to see the entire workflow as it happens is beneficial to everyone. That's my tip. Good luck.
Production is like a train that keeps constantly chugging along, and the main source of fuel that keeps it going is communication. Being able to talk to your peers efficiently can really help speed up production. For example, if you're given work that requires a certain deadline to be finished by, but you know that you won't be able to reach it, tell the director. That way, they will quickly be able to give your work to someone else who can complete it in time. This keeps your workflow train chugging along at an efficient speed. However, if you fail to communicate your issues to your director or peers, the workflow train slows down and sometimes comes to a complete stop, which in turn delays the estimated time of arrival, frustrating both its passengers and conductor.
A Discord server for your object show crew is great for production and keeping things organized and, well, productive. But one thing a lot of people overlook is that the server doesn't just have to be for object show production. Stuff like gaming or messing around with the rest of your crew or even just chatting does numbers for productivity, since everyone is already actively engaging with the show, even without working. At the end of the day, it turns your crew server into more like a friend group server, which makes it a lot more fun to work on. Just try not to get off track too much.
People won't want to work on your show if no progress is being made, especially if you yourself aren't doing anything. You need to be the one who spearheads and champions your project. People are generally most motivated at the abstract stage of a project, and then again when the episode is mostly complete. So the best way to motivate people is to make more progress. Or you can pay them. I find it can help to do a small bit every day, so like one shot on a scene per day. Also, I forgot to say, it's good to share screenshots of your progress with your crew.
You want to use Google Sheets to organize your work production and make sure all the friends helping you out are all on the same page. List out all the categories of production: voice acting, audio, storyboards, design, and animation. To track progress, you can create a color-coded drop-down to show whether or not work is incomplete in production, revision, or complete. Another drop-down can be used to list all your friends, allowing you to easily show who is assigned to what work. Using the count-if formula, you can track progress by checking how much is considered complete, and you may even create a graph to visualize this data. Create links to quickly redirect you to other useful items such as your script and Google Drive. When sharing, make sure to set it so that anyone with a link can view it.
You know how you'll sit down to record some lines and you can't find your next line, so you have to Control F through the script or scroll through your phone to find what you're looking for? Line trackers are very useful tools that I never see people use for their shows. The general idea is to make a spreadsheet that has all of the lines in your show separated by character, with additional notes for things like delivery and tone. There's no right way to do it, and you can change it to match your needs. It's only there for ease of access for you and your voice actors.
I've been working on an object show comic, but I feel like it's not good enough. It needs to be perfect.
I understand. Making a new show or comic or anything can be daunting, but don't let that pressure you into a perfectionist mindset. You might find it more fulfilling to create stuff than to iterate on the same themes and ideas over and over. Once you get the ball rolling, you'll have more time to develop the style and skills you use in creating your object show. For my comic, I just made it up as I went along. I had a lot more fun doing it that way. Don't forget, this isn't your day job. Have fun with what you make.
Here's a hypothetical. You want to make an object show, but you don't want to learn how to animate. That's okay. Don't let that stop you. Not everyone has the patience to learn how to animate, and it could be very overwhelming. That's why some shows are comics or made in PowerPoint. People want to use the programs they're used to. For example, in my show, I drag the characters around on my art program like you're seeing right now. Not saying you have to do what I do, but find ways to cut corners and make the process fun and not tiring, or else you're going to be miserable making your show.
If you're getting stumped on coming up with cool ideas for your object show, or you're coming up with the story of it and you maybe hit a roadblock while working on it, then I personally think it'd be a good idea to talk to your crew and or friends about it. Maybe they could help you fully realize that idea, or help finish the story of your show. Or even better, they could help make the idea even bigger and better than what you originally thought of. Collaboration is an awesome thing.
When figuring out the premise and look for your show, don't limit yourself to just object shows. A lot of shows are built on not just BFDI, but iterations of other object shows, which can make a lot of them look sort of samey. It's totally fine if BFDI is your main source of inspiration, but there's a wide variety of other mediums you can get fresh ideas from. BFDI itself pulled inspiration from plenty of sources. It's largely influenced by Total Drama Island, which parodied reality competition shows like Survivor, and its visual style also was heavily inspired by Homestar Runner. So look for stuff beyond just objects that speak to you. TV shows, books, movies, music, art, anything you want to include elements of for your series. Expanding your palette like this helps make your object show fresh and unique.
You've got your idea, and now you're ready to tell your story. Except you're not sure where to start. Well, let me tell you a secret. It doesn't have to be an object show. You don't have to be limited by the medium with which you use to tell your story. It could be an object show, but it could also be an object comic, or game, maybe even a novel. It could even be an ARG. The possibilities are genuinely endless. The only limitation here is your imagination.
Allow me to introduce you to the concept of systematic procrastination.
Just hear me out here.
More often than not, your first draft at anything is going to range from, well, okay, not quite the best to, which is why it's important to give yourself both the time and space to do the task at hand, which is also why I'm going to tell you the following. Give up. For now, you don't actually have to finish this. It's 11 p.m. Go to bed, you dummy. Hey, remember when I said this was systematic? Don't overdo it. Things don't look so good for people that overdo.
Do you often find yourself working extra long hours and experiencing regular bodily pain? Well, fun fact, you need to take breaks. But how do I know how long I should work before I take a break? Well, here's something to remember. Most health experts recommend eating every 3 to 4 hours, which is your excuse to stop working, even if you don't actually eat. Now, does that mean work 3 to 4 hours? Absolutely not. Everyone's work styles are completely unique to themselves. I can only work 2 hours before getting tired out.
Creativity. Do whatever you want. When making your When making your object show, you can literally do anything. Like whatever you find interesting. Doing whatever you find interesting will make the process more fun for you.
Hey, what the?
For example, insert object show here is really goofy and loaded with my own specific sense of humor in writing. but it's not a competition show.
What?
This can go for art style too.
Whoa.
Thinking outside the box will make your show stand out and add character to it, making it your special creation. If you try to make it formulaic and a carbon copy of something, you may not get the same satisfaction and could make working on it stale, and you might even lose motivation completely.
I think a lot of people think that when they make an object show, there's a certain set of rules they must follow. Like, it must feature objects, it must be a certain competition formula, it must add some sort of dark plot to make it interesting, even that you must make it in certain programs. None of these things are true. You don't have to follow any of these made up rules because, like I said, they're made up. You can change the competition method or not even do a competition. It could be story based or even a slice of life. It could be something entirely different than objects or even a mix of the two. The shows you make are showcases your creativity. Let it thrive run wild. Don't limit yourself. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the next trendsetter.
Remember to think outside the box. As an artist, animator, writer, or whatever you may aspire to be, remember that you should take steps in your profession to further improve yourself and to be unique. This community keeps a lot of fun and reusable formulas, and that's fine. But to further your creativity, you gotta try taking the helm. Do something that scares you. Try a new method of designing characters, writing a unique story, how you draw your backgrounds, or take a fun spin at one of the formulas. Keep trying. Doing this could bring you closer to a style unique and special to you.
They want me to be the new speaker box. Tell them no. Rule number 1 in comedy, write stuff down. Doesn't matter if it's jokes, specific character interactions. If you think of something funny, you're gonna wanna write that down, all right? You're gonna put that in your show. And don't worry, oh, it's too stupid. Oh, nobody's gonna find this funny. Shut up. If you think it's funny, other people are gonna find it funny. And you got an audience, baby.
Thank you, Coolest Red. Thank you, Coolest Red. That was very informative.
Settle down.
Hello, I'm the object show idea you just got in your head. However, with all the other important things you have to do throughout the day, I can only live up here for so long before I... Ow! Oh man, I forgot my idea! If only I had an easy outlet to share them to. Hey, actually, there's a lot of easy ways to save your on-the-spot ideas. You can write down simple notes, do a little doodle or two, or even tell them to a friend. I don't like it. That way, you'll always have a reliable place to remember your new ideas or even re-explore some old ones. Hey, look, there's my object show tip idea.
When deciding a cast for your project, you need to think of a few things. For example, is it a competition, story-based, slice of life, etc.? If you're going the competition route, I'd say having a cast of around 14 to 16 would be a great start. Though if you want to try going for smaller or bigger numbers depending on the scope of your show, feel free to do so.
When writing scripts, I'd recommend formatting them to an industry standard. Start with using a 12-point Courier font, with dialogue having middle alignment and scene descriptions with left alignment. This makes it easy to read and gives a rough estimate of the script's length. Roughly 1 page is equal to 1 minute. There's lots of programs you can use, but I personally use Google Docs because it's really easy to share, it's great for giving feedback, and especially good if you're collaborating with other writers. Since this layout is near universal, you can apply this to pretty much any creative project you work on, object show or not. Plus, it looks great on a resume if you want to enter the industry.
If you have a line of dialogue that any character could say, you actually shouldn't. That's the quickest way for a character to fade into the background, especially when they're part of a huge cast and that generic line may be one of only a few they get in that episode. Instead, rewrite the line in a manner that specifically suits who's talking, or even reveals something about who they are. This helps ensure that each character in your show has a reason to be there. This doesn't mean that everyone gets an equal amount of attention in every episode, but it's a great goal for every member of the full cast appearing in an episode to have at least one moment that really shows off their personality. Not every character can have an arc in every episode, but every character can still have a presence.
If you're planning on making a more serious object show, it's a good idea to give your characters depth. Modeling your character around what their stereotype would say, rather than what the character would say, often leads to a flat personality that doesn't really go anywhere. Like, think of how often the irrationally mean character ends up being the first one to go. It's good to remember your character's experiences and their own logic when writing their dialogue. Another thing, dialogue really hits the spot when it's something that only that character would say. Characters are often given useless lines for the sake of screen time, and while this may seem like a fair way to keep them on track with the more relevant characters, it might actually make them seem more bland and useless.
A tightly packed episode script can go a long way when it comes to keeping your audience engaged while also keeping your show quick and to the point. Remember that your first draft of your episode script is exactly that. Give it a day, go back in, and feel the flow of the episode. That's when you go in and really tighten things up. Spend your time rereading scenes over and over again, trimming out lines that may not be needed, rewording sentences that may be too clunky for what a person would actually say, and ultimately, making sure every single line is pushing either a joke or the story forward in some way.
Something I've learned from writing the last 2 episodes of my show is to pace yourself when you're writing a script. It can be easy to get carried away with all the different ideas you have when you're drafting a script, so try to pick out what's funniest or most important to the plot of the episode before you start writing. I like to use a script timer to make sure nothing in my episode is dragged out for too long, but the truly best way to test the flow of your episode is through having multiple read-throughs with your voice actors. People would much rather watch a 15-minute episode over a 30-minute episode, so only write one if it's appropriate to the plot.
Sometimes you feel like you've written the perfect script, but when audio comes in, you realize, yeah, that sounded a lot better in your head. This is why I do read-throughs. I read what I wrote out loud by myself or with a friend, and I notice a lot of things I wouldn't have noticed otherwise. Things like, that scene is way longer than I thought. That line was really difficult to say. What even prompted the character to act like that? And even simpler stuff I may have missed, like typos or missing words.
When you're writing character dynamics and you want to make said dynamic believable, don't stress yourself out too hard on how to write realistic enough dialogue when you can instead think about how characters interact with each other through body language. In these examples, you can see how characters interact with each other, show you how they feel about each other rather than tell you. Like how in this animation one of the characters is reacting to the other's rant in a way that brushes it off, like they've heard it a million times, thus showing that these characters know each other very well. Thinking about adding non-verbal characterization to your interactions adds more nuance to your dynamics and characters in much less time, hence why so many writers and animators prefer show over tell.
A tip I learned about making complex characters is to get into their head. And I mean really nest yourself into their head. You know, putting yourself in their shoes. Every person in the real world has different views and opinions based on their own life experience. Find out how your character not only perceives and interacts with the world around them, but also how they might even perceive themselves. Studying your characters in that way can help you build off existing traits and, with enough time and effort, we'll have a more fleshed out and fully realized character. Yay!
One of the biggest tips that can help make writing your character feel all the more fleshed out is to think about character dynamics. Simple charts like this are not only fun to make, but can really help flesh out characters. Think about it. If you were to shove these two in a room, what would happen and why? You may learn something new about your character, and you may discover a really cool, unlikely dynamic. Even if they never interact, maybe when they're mentioned, your character will respond differently, which will help make your characters all the more enjoyable and feel even more real.
Personally, my favorite part of object shows are the teams. Seeing characters being forced to interact with characters they wouldn't usually get along with is so cool. Or the opposite, seeing characters make unlikely friendships due to being stuck together is freaking awesome. When making teams, you should really consider how they'll interact during the rest of the show. Not every team needs a conflict, but it's good if a few of them have some. Maybe 2 contestants on the team usually take the leadership role. Now they gotta fight it out or learn to get along. Maybe no one on the team wants to be a leader, and the team's pure chaos. Whatever. Just consider team dynamics before just randomly putting a bunch of characters who are friends on the same team. Maybe try and find interesting ways to split up those friends. I don't know. Or you can be a weirdo and have no teams in your show, but who wants to watch that?
When designing a character for an object show, you gotta ensure that it's simple and clear. Don't put excessive details or overly intense colors, as they can make the character visually noisy and difficult to animate, especially since most shows use assets. Give your character a unique yet clean shape that defines them while avoiding similarities to existing designs. Remember, simplicity doesn't equal boring. A character can be both distinct and visually appealing at the same time.
Sometimes the most jarring thing to me in object shows is when the look of the show doesn't match the tone of the writing. I know, the OSC is already full of established styles people fall back on, but if you really want to push the tone you're going for, try experimenting with your show's look. If you're making a cute, bubbly show, you might want to round your characters, change the facial and limb proportions to make them seem smaller, and use lighter or more saturated colors. If you want to give it a dangerous edge, thick, sharp outlines with heavy contrast should do the trick. These are just a couple ideas, but the possibilities are endless. Think about what kind of style would best fit the mood and story you're trying to make.
Creating an art style for your object show is pretty important. It may be intimidating to create a unique style to stand out from other shows, but don't stress yourself out too much. Try experimenting with shapes, line weight, brushes, color, limb styles, face placements, and also eye and mouth shapes. You can also take inspiration from pre-existing object shows by taking what you like from a show style and mixing it to create your own. Maybe you like the mouth from an animated Insanity 4, the color limbs from 1, or maybe you want to add highlights to the character's eyes like I did for my show. The possibilities are endless! Remember, have fun with it and make sure it's easy to replicate. It'll make the lives of your animators much easier.
One thing that many people, myself included, can underestimate in creating or working on a show is the value of consistency. If there's multiple animators, it's probably best for them to use the same software. To keep things even more unified, create style guides for people to follow like this. There are lots of resources online on what these guides should look like, so feel free to take inspiration.
In terms of coloring, my best advice is to just experiment. It seems easy to stick to the same coloring styles you're already familiar with, but if you want to branch out, don't be afraid to get messy and try lots of different palettes. After you understand the basic rules of coloring, you are able to use them or bend them in any way you want to use. It will never start out perfect, but with time, you'll be able to communicate an idea exactly how you want to.
When deciding a show's cast, it's common to forget about color balance. Even BFDI itself tends to have this issue. Having a diversely colored cast makes each and every character more unique and memorable. It also just feels a lot nicer to not look at the same few colors over and over again. Luckily, creating color balance can be as simple as tweaking a few of the designs to better even things out. This domino is gray and boring, but with a few adjustments, it now has a yellow twinge, despite still being white. None of this really matters though, because who's gonna stop you from making that domino red, or green, or purple? Sure, most dominoes aren't purple, but this is fiction. And I guess some dominoes are purple.
I like to turn my limb assets into brush strokes. That way I can turn a transition like this into something a lot smoother like this. You can turn anything into a brush stroke by right-clicking it and choosing Create Paintbrush. With your new brush arm, you can move it around and shape tween it so that the transition between arms is a lot smoother. It works for legs too. It's not needed in every case, but can be good to really nail those slower or more subtle movements.
When making a prop, you should always ensure it is scaled properly with the character rigs. If you don't, it just leads to something like this. Symbols in Adobe Animate automatically scale to 100% when you drag and drop it from the library onto the stage. You can double check this with the transform window activated. Start off with a default scaled character body and create a default shape and a symbol for the prop to make sure you have the right sizing. This might be obvious to some, but trust me, inconsistent scaling happens way more than you think. Having the body next to the prop helps with picking color palettes, maintaining consistent outline width and proportions. All depends on the character and style you're going for.
The sub-selection tool is your friend. It's a great way to stretch out parts of a shape, adjust curves, fix weird miter bugs, and overall have a much finer control of the curves and points that make up your shapes. It's also great for keeping an eye out for what I like to call curve flattening, which is when two points are slightly too close together or have a shallow enough curve that when rendering your scene, Adobe Animate will flatten the curves, causing your shapes to look sharp and lumpy, which is why it's always good to practice non-destructive editing and keep your curves nice and clean.
When you're making characters or props for your show, it can be a good idea to make sure your asset is created in a non-destructive manner. Which is to say that you want to make sure that the contents of your asset are fully preserved for future edits, like perspective shots, color changes, damage or distortion to the object, and other stuff too. A few good ways to accomplish this are making sure that your lines aren't converted to fills, your elements are stratified into layers, and you use a lot of masking. Note that if your assets are too complex, your FLA file can get laggy, so it's nice to have a simplified version with less layers that you can actually animate with.
I just made some 3D for my object show.
That doesn't look like an object show.
Well, let's fix that. First, make sure the object uses flat or unshaded materials. We want to eliminate any complex features or lighting that might clash with the clean style Adobe Animate assets usually have. Next, we need an outline. Best way to get this effect is what's called a convex hull, which is really just a bigger version of our model turned inside out so that we only see the back faces. Now this looks good, but what about animation? Here, we generally want to avoid conventional rigs, as they end up looking a bit stiff. Instead, we can use things like lattice deformers to be more faithful to the style we're trying to match. Putting it all together, get something pretty convincing.
I think so too.
When creating a background, many decisions about color, composition, and lighting need to be made.
The further you get into refining a background, the harder it's going to be to go back and make adjustments to these fundamentals. That's why I always figure those aspects out first by creating a small, manageable version of the background. And sometimes, several versions will be created to compare different ideas side by side, also known as thumbnailing. Once the big decisions are locked in, I can go ahead and refine it without worrying about making any large adjustments.
So you might have heard of how you can use Minecraft as a base for your backgrounds. So in this tip, I'm going to show you how you can extend this idea and apply it to 360-degree backgrounds. For this, you need a modded Minecraft client, in this case I have the Fabric Loader, and install the Replay mod. Position the camera based on how you would like the background to be and press F2. Select Accurate Rectangular Rendering as your rendering method. Ensure you stabilize your camera's yaw, pitch and roll, then you can click on the Take Screenshot button. Voila! You have your 360-degree background base, which you can then use to make your own custom background for your object show.
A good way to have versatile, crisp backgrounds and to avoid blurry ones when animating is to use vector layers and vector shapes when creating them, which is very common in programs like Adobe Animate, Toon Boom, and OpenToons, but some programs do not support these tools like Clip Studio Paint, Flip-a-Clip, and Procreate. This leads to blurry backgrounds when you move, resize, or zoom into them with your camera. A way to work around this if you don't have a vector program is when you're illustrating your background, make the canvas size much bigger than what you need it to be, so you'll have some wiggle room when it comes to the transformations and camera zooms, or just use a program with vector shapes, that's easier.
As a storyboarder, your job is to make the bones of a scene, meaning you are tasked with how the scene should be laid out. While this is perfectly fine and passable, it can get a little boring and repetitive. Instead of keeping things centered at all times, imagine your canvas being split into chunks of threes. You can push things around and compose the scene based off of these thirds and create a much more visually appealing shot. And it helps you flex your creativity despite the limitations that you might have. This practice is called the rule of thirds.
Let's talk about how to use the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds are used as a guide to help create the composition of your shot and where to place your subject, in this case your character, within the shot. For example, let's say you have two characters sharing the same screen. Using this guide, each one should be placed in the middle of these two vertical lines. Otherwise, if you only have one character, they should be placed in either one of these lines, or in some cases directly in the center. You can also use these intersecting points of the grid called power points. These points are used to help draw the viewer's attention towards your subject, as well as creating some interesting dynamic shots.
Expensive, you know.
Something that can heavily stall your production is taking too long with your storyboards. The purpose of storyboarding is to place characters in a scene and give them rough acting to give animators a place to start. The issue I see sometimes, though, is some artists take a bit too long with their boards. You want to make sure you're getting out the ideas quickly, so don't be so precious with each drawing. If we're drawing the Mona Lisa on each frame, your sequence will never get done, so keep it quick and get those ideas on paper.
Hi, so I do a lot of storyboards, and I think the biggest advice I can give about storyboards is to make them as efficient for the animators as possible. Usually I see this sort of 4x4 grid with like 4x4 panels, and at least for me personally, that isn't as efficient for me when I'm animating. Whereas this, I kind of condense it down so you can see more panels in a smaller space. It also makes it easier to read the text because it's larger in this format, and there's no lines kind of intercepting it. And since it isn't like a professional sort of show, you don't need to stick with like the standard storyboard guidelines.
Perspective! By giving your object show perspective, it opens a whole new realm of possibilities. It could be the kind of perspective in terms of, well, you know, the object's perspective, seeing their view in first-person view. Or it could depend on how the object looks, like the angling of the object. Not only is it a cool effect, but it's also a guarantee that you'll get your audience immersed into the show.
One trick to keeping your show easy to follow visually is a film guideline called the 180 rule. This is best explained using a dialogue scene with two characters. Imagine an invisible line going straight through the two of them. On one side of this line is the imaginary camera that your show is being shot through, and it must stay on one side of the line. It can move and zoom in, but should not cross the line. Failing to follow this rule can make the layout of your scene confusing and take your audience out of the experience. This rule is applicable for all types of scenes with any amount of characters. If you want to intentionally disorient or just try something unconventional, then breaking this rule may be the way to go, but following this rule most of the time will help keep things clear.
In object show animation, scene setup usually refers to setting up all the assets and props needed for a scene in one file before starting character animation. This can also include layout or shot composition, meaning placing characters in a right position on the stage for each shot. Here's an example of scene setup for my BFDI 18 scene and what it looks like fully animated. Scene setup gives me an idea of what the whole scene will look like from start to finish before I start animating, allowing me to fully focus on character animation without having to add assets and set up shots later on.
Hi, I'm Jazzy Oliver, the voice of Paintbrush over on Inanimate Insanity. My OSC tip for you in the voice acting sphere is to have fun. You get to bring a character to life. Like, your voice gets to bring that character to life. So, go in, be professional, bring your A game, but remember to have fun.
Is it hard for you to read your lines when it comes time to record? Let me see if I can help. Before I record anything, I spend a few minutes doing lip flutters. Start with a really gentle flutter until you're out of breath. When you feel more comfortable, you can add a little bit of strength to the flutter or even some pitch. Another thing, take a pen, put it in your mouth, and say the whole alphabet. Don't just speed through it, say every letter individually. If you do these enough, not only will reading out loud and voice acting become much easier, you will also find yourself being a much better speaker in your day-to-day life.
The voice is an often overlooked aspect of a character's creation, but it's really one of the more important and recognizable parts of a character. One of the first things you could probably remember about Mickey Mouse is his high-pitched, friendly voice. So don't be afraid to experiment with different voices for your different characters. It gives your characters more personality, more memorability, and it'll help diversify your cast.
You're about to start voice acting, but a certain line calls for a lot of emotion. Look, we've all been there. It can be embarrassing to fully commit out of fear of looking corny. Well, let me blow your mind. It does not matter. When you record, try throwing a take in with extra emotion. Never be afraid of going over the top! Voice directors would always rather tell you to reel it back than always keep telling you to give more. This doesn't just apply to voice acting either. This applies to all acting in general. TV, film, and especially theater. Don't be embarrassed, have fun, and throw yourself into the character.
Voice acting. Your character is a real being within their universe with their own feelings and emotions. Don't be afraid to use your face or arms to get into character. Don't overexert yourself with too wild of a voice. It can hurt your throat and won't work for long recordings. Record multiple takes for each line. You should scrap any takes with mic peaking or bumping in your recording. It will break the immersion of your show.
Hey voice actors, sometimes it can be difficult for a director to explain what specific inflection they want for a line. So you should do more takes. 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 So you should do more takes.
When recording lines, pay attention to which words you stress in a sentence, because I didn't steal her diary and I didn't steal her diary are two different sentences.
When it comes to voice acting, it's really crucial that you consider what's happening prior to or during the scene in which your character is speaking. Like, if your character's in the spooky forest, why not deliver your lines with a slight stutter in between words? Or if your character's not getting along with their team, why not pitch your voice up a little bit and speak in a louder, more demanding tone? Subtle voice inflections like these not only make your performance more believable, but it enhances the overall scene and situation your character is in. The audience wants to feel engrossed and involved with the characters of your show, and you can accomplish that by putting yourself in the shoes of the character you're voicing.
Something really useful when recording lines for really any show is making sure that you have some sort of echo cancellation. If you record out in an open room, the lines will echo and it won't sound as crystal clear. Getting an isolation shield or a voice booth, which is way more expensive but way more worth it in the long run from my own experience, is usually the best way to make sure your lines don't echo as much. If you don't have enough money to buy those things, you can also use a blanket and cover yourself and your microphone before recording.
Are you a voice actor or aspire to be one? Why not try audio editing? You are already at the DAW messing with your own lines. Why not mess with sound effects, other people's lines, music, and more? There's a lot less saturated market for audio editors, so you'll be more likely to get accepted into a crew as one. Plus, the skills you'll learn from audio editing can be used to segue into other positions, like music composition and animation.
Do you ever want to tell your story without using words? When you're planning a scene, consider layering your audio. This can look like backing tracks, music, or sounds of the space where the scene takes place. Sound effects, or Foley. sounds that emphasize the action going on screen. Layering audio can help tell your story of what is going on, or off camera. Notice the difference it makes when I remove my backing track for the scene? Not every scene needs to be filled with dialogue. Watch how your favorite media use silence to show the viewer the feelings or clues they want you to notice.
Sound effects! You probably want them in your show. Whether you are the creator of your show and/or a sound designer, what can really help everyone stay organized is gathering all of the sound effects you want to use for your show and making folders for them so they can easily be sent over. And if you really want to be extra organized, make multiple little folders that sort out all of the different sound effect types, such as footsteps, whooshes, impacts, literally anything you want added to your show.
Yeah, I want that played whenever someone gets punched. And that will play when the punch falls down.
Staying communicative with your team when it comes to sound design can make a huge difference in production. Happy folder making!
My golden rule is to always include 10 seconds of room tone at the start of your recording session. Room tone is what your room sounds like when nothing is moving. Most DAWs have a built-in noise reduction tool for you to use. Here is Audacity's. After importing your lines, click on the 3 little dots here to open up the spectrogram view. See how there's a consistent blue line across our entire recording? Let's get rid of that. First, highlight your room tone on the timeline. Go to Effect, Noise Removal and Repair, and click Noise Reduction. Then, click on Get Noise Profile. This tells Audacity what data to look for when removing the background noise. Next, go back to the noise reduction menu and adjust your settings as needed. It's important not to use too harsh of a setting or your lines will start sounding like a Skype call. Repeat the process as needed. Every recording is different, so be sure to find the sweet spot each and every time.
Plosives are when your mic picks up your air pressure on harsh consonants such as pa, ba, ta, ka, so on. It's good to invest in a pop filter or make your own to circumvent plosives, but sometimes they'll still slip into your record.
Purple puppies.
My mic is catching my breath on this low frequency. Those are plosives. You can use a high-pass filter to catch these, and that's a solid solution.
Purple puppies.
But it can mess with the fidelity of your record if you're not careful. So what I like to do is open the spectrogram and use an auto heal tool. With Adobe Audition's auto heal brush, you can literally scrub away those pesky plosives. So
purple puppies
turns into
purple puppies.
One thing I see that is really common with beginner musicians is some of their music is way too loud. A tip that I have is to always add some kind of limiter or a soft clipper to help balance audio levels. Heck, maybe even a compressor. But I'll go too overboard with a compressor, limiter, or soft clipper because it will make things sound really muddy.
If you want to be better at animating, study the source files. They're very useful, and you can see how it's all animated. Giftia has plenty for you to use, and if lucky, some others too.
But what if they don't release their source files?
And I say, what's stopping you from analyzing every frame of the video, then reanimating it with near perfect detail?
Right!
Reanimating your favorite part of an object show episode is also a really good way to improve, and that reanimation could be a good resource you can share with others who also want to learn how to animate. Everyone gets their stuff learned from other people, so it's a win-win. So start up, kid. There'll be a quiz later.
The biggest thing I see beginners mess up when they're staging a scene is eye contact. Individually, each of these drawings is fine, but together, it doesn't look like the characters are actually looking at each other. You can fix this by making them face each other more, or using eyebrows to frame the eyeball area. Make sure to consider when characters' faces are different heights too. One thing I like to do for that is change the angle of the vertical eyes.
You essentially only need these 4 mouth positions. F mouths are common but more or less optional unless the closed mouth shows 2 rows of teeth, in which case they're necessary to obscure the bottom row. L mouths are unconventional in the hand-drawn style.
If you hate lip syncing as much as I do, here's an easy way to expedite the process. Make a set of mouths with whatever mouths you may need, and put each one on its own keyframe in a graphic symbol. Then convert each individual mouth into its own movie clip symbol. In those movie clip symbols, extend each keyframe out by several frames, and then make a keyframe on the 3rd frame. Depending on what kind of mouth you're doing this on, like an open vowel, you can make the first keyframe taller, then the second keyframe slightly shorter. With your mouth set up, you can start lip syncing. Using Frame Picker, align the mouth to the vowel or consonant you hear fit. Once you render or press Ctrl and Enter, we can get the final result.
But you said I could help.
Here's a quick tip for making object shows more expressive in a way. Here's an example.
Oh no, it's so sad to see Ice Cube gone.
If a character just says their line without any emotion or body language, it won't hit as hard. Now let's try that again.
Oh no, it's so sad to see Ice Cube gone.
Instead of just saying the line, show the emotion, a sad look, maybe a little panic in her expression, or a soft frown. These small details help show she's upset, and they make scenes feel more alive.
Ever tried animating a character but found yourself stumped at how to make it look right? Well, why not try acting it out? Recording reference footage is something you'll often see professional animators do, and just like any visual reference, it can really help you convey the poses and action you want with realism. Like in this short clip with Fiery. By recording footage of me pumping my fists and jumping, I was able to match each little movement during animation and make Fiery look super awesome. But if you're a bit camera shy, that's okay. Ultimately, the way you make animated characters come to life is up to you.
So you've completed your character animation for your scene? Sweet, let's take a gander.
Well, that wasn't very nice.
Looks great already, but why stop here? We can add nuance and detail to our work. Let's just look to the 12 principles of animation. Here we can find techniques such as anticipation, overlapping action, arcing, all stuff we can add to what we've made. Inside of your tween, start creating keyframes and moving your assets to create these effects. For example, we can make the character dip downwards to anticipate, the tops of their bodies and their arms drag behind to create follow through, and dragging the body down, or even using the arrow keys to force motion into an arc. Here's how it looks now.
Well, that wasn't very nice.
You shouldn't be restricted to the linear motion of tweens. Experiment, go wild, and see what works for you.
When you're animating a character, your brain is keeping track of so many different moving parts that it can get pretty difficult making sure that the final animation is nice and fluid. Something you can do to help with this is breaking a character's movement down into simpler shapes or points, and then tracking the acceleration and the arcs of the character piece by piece. Each piece should have its own little pathway and a clear arc that it follows, and for me at least, paying attention to how each individual part of your character is actually moving is a good way of making sure everything comes out the way you want it to, and can help bring some additional life and fluidity to your animation.
The best tip I can give regarding object show animation and animation in general is work smarter, not harder. Find workarounds. As long as they look good, you shouldn't be ashamed to do it. Alright, so this is my BFDIA 22 scene. I was expected to do a full 3D rotation, as you can see in the storyboard here, and that's ridiculous. It's impossible. Okay, so what I did instead was, a semi 3D, everything's where it should be. Bar in the fence fully covers the screen. Boom, opposite side of the fence. It looks good. And I was able to do it faster than if I try to actually do it full 3D rotation. So, best takeaway from this, work smarter, not harder.
Animation can be fun and freeing on your own, but when directing a team, it's essential to ensure that your library and all of your symbols are organized and named. Take a look at my rigs library, for example. It's absolutely hideous. Ugh. Let's clean that up. This way, it's easy to navigate every part of the rig without having to click the preview to see what symbol I'm actually selecting. When working with big asset files that contain collections of characters, it's probably wise to group them by level of importance, like main characters and extras. Or, in the case of shows common in the OSC, teams or competition status. There we go, that's way better. It'll save you and your team a lot of headache.
Tech support time! In some versions of Adobe Animate, you may notice that when you double-click a tween symbol at an interpolated frame, then exit the symbol, the tween split itself all on its own, creating a blemish in your neat timeline and fragmenting your precious custom you spent some time perfecting and didn't save a preset for! That's because you're using the free transform tool to enter your symbol. For whatever reason, this causes Animate to think you're moving the symbol as you're entering its timeline, creating a keyframe with a new position. If that annoys you as much as me, make a habit of switching to the selection tool or a non-interpolated frame. Also, make incremental backups in case.
Here's how you mask object show characters. You want to get your asset, create a duplicate of that asset symbol, grab any of the layers that aren't the outline, and create a duplicate layer of those. You could just copy and paste them on a separate layer and line it up, but it's typically less accurate that way. After merging the layers, hit Ctrl B. This breaks down any groups or symbols that are still in this layer. Then set this layer to a solid color like red. Click the layer and select mask. Then create a new layer, put that layer under the mask layer, and now anything you draw will not go outside of that mask layer if you go back on the main scene.
Yo, so you know how you make a symbol transparent and it starts doing whatever this is? One way to fix this is to turn the symbol into a movie clip, add a blur filter and set the blur to 0, and now the transparency is fixed. However, one thing that's awesome about movie clips is that you can't see what's animated inside of the symbol until you export the scene, so make sure the animation inside is done before doing all of that. Alternatively, you could just add a keyframe where the symbol is temporarily a movie clip. That works too.
Hey kids, you ever see fancy lighting in an object show and you're like, wow, that looks so cool, how can I do something like that?
It's actually quite simple. A lot of these effects can be achieved in Adobe Animate by playing with the blur filter, blend modes, and gradients. Take the spotlight effect from the II2 finale. All it really is a rough shape with the blur filter applied and the blend mode turned to add. Another example, this crazy multicolor background in the BFB intro is just a bunch of solids and gradients layered on top of each other with different blend modes. You can get some super cool looking effects using these techniques, so go wild. Just don't make it too eye-straining.
Wish it was possible to mask out your symbols to have a nice gradient effect where it smoothly fades out towards the end? Well, first, make a movie clip symbol of an already existing one. Go inside, layer a gradient on top and set one of the colors to 0 opacity, then convert the gradient to a symbol so you can set the blend mode of it to alpha. Then click back to scene 1 to set the blending of your main symbol to layer, and voila! You can adjust the effect however you want. You can apply the backgrounds, characters, images, and you can even animate it. It's your choice to make whatever nice lighting or ghostly looking effects you can come up with.
Symbols in Adobe Animate are awesome because they allow for tweening and storing animations inside of a graphic, which is something that most object show animators typically do. However, when working with symbols, you will most likely come across a situation where the animation inside of a graphic doesn't sync up with the frames on the outside, and it ends up looking like this. This usually happens when you want to move the frames outside of the symbol around, like if you wanted to extend or shorten a tween. To fix this, all you gotta do is highlight the selection you want to fix, right-click, and click the button that says Synchronize Symbols, and boom, fixed! Who knew animation was so easy?
Making music can be intimidating, especially when it comes to what program to use. It might be scary putting yourself out there if you go in with the mindset that you need a million expensive plugins or top-notch programs to make good music. While they can be helpful to have, not having them doesn't mean you can't make music. From personal experience, some free or cheap starter programs I'd recommend are GarageBand and FL Studio Mobile, but even programs like Audacity can be used to mix parts together. If you've got a good idea for a song, don't let program limitations stop you from making it happen.
If you want to try songwriting for a show but you're struggling with ideas, try writing with limitations. Writing with a limitation in mind can force you to find creative solutions and help you make an end product that sounds more unique. Think of it as a challenge. Here's a list of different writing challenges you can make for yourself. The point is to train your skills by writing in ways you haven't thought of before. Hopefully you got some good ideas. Now, for the next person's tip.
Try letting your music be character motivated. If a character's gonna sing a song, ask yourself questions like, what kind of vocabulary do they use? Would they sing fast or slow, loud or soft? What genre best fits their personality and frame of mind in this moment? This can really help guide you while you write music and lyrics. Even if you're just scoring a scene, you can try assigning your characters unique instruments or recurring motifs to represent them. This will help your music feel really connected to the story you're trying to tell.
When it comes to assembling the background music or score for your object show, consistency is key. Having a strong musical identity can go a long way with making your show stick in people's minds. Some of the most popular shows in the community have soundtracks that you could instantly recognize just by hearing a single instrument. Out of these 4 object shows, guess which one this is from? See what I mean? If you don't have the time or resources for an original score, there are still ways to achieve this consistency with stock music. With how much royalty-free music exists on the internet, you're bound to find plenty of tracks that fit your vision. But the most important thing to remember is, if you want to score your show with Kevin MacLeod music, don't use dubstep for the intro.
Hi, do not post your intro before the first episode of your object show. This started out as a saying, but there actually is some merit to it. While it does seem like a great way to build up hype, you could be building yourself up for disappointment. A lot of the time, I see creators upload their intros super early into production, and this can more often than not end up in them getting demotivated or losing interest very quickly. A better way to build up hype would be to upload things like progress updates, promotional art, or even sneak peeks. But you should only do these things when you're much further into production. It's all about patience, and waiting for the right time to post.
Adding subtitles can greatly help you grow your object show audience. People from many different countries watch object shows, and luckily YouTube has an auto-translate feature, so even if the subtitles are in your own language, your show will become more accessible to viewers. If you can't add all the subtitles by yourself, try hiring a subtitler and giving them access to YouTube's subtitle editor. Or, if you want to collaborate, each person can work on different sections, then download and merge the subtitle files together.
You finished your episode. Now let's make a thumbnail. Maybe this thumbnail could use a makeover. When making your thumbnail, try and focus on how attention-grabbing it's gonna be. You want to have clear focal points with elements that trigger emotion in your viewer, such as expressive faces. Additionally, remember that a colorful thumbnail is far more clickable than a dull one. These bright hues will make your video more eye-catching. It's already looking better, but we can tweak this further. Do you see all that space we're not using? Well, use it. You want to use as much space as you can in your thumbnail while still keeping it simple. Move your elements around until you have a good composition. Maybe even add some text. Yoink. Yay. Amazing. You did it. A good thumbnail.
So if you just made something you're really proud of, but no one seems to care about what you've made, or even made them upset. What if I'm a failure because I'm not good enough? Well, just because something you created did not turn out as well as you hoped, that doesn't mean that you are a failure. You don't have to be defined by how other people see you, because you're you. You can always keep creating as long as the act of it still satisfies you.
Hello, I make an object show perhaps just like you. Now, as the creator of your show, and especially considering your independent nature, you are guaranteed complete control over your project, but because of the whole viewer interactivity mandate, I don't see many people taking advantage of that. So my advice is to not let it get to your head, having a fan base and all. If you're headlining a project, there's no need to get mad at the powers that be for thwarting your direction because the powers that be don't exist. Why limit yourself like that? Nobody has to know what decisions you're making during production. Remember, you are the sole vision behind your art, so do what's best for you and your interests, not your fans. Take care.
Criticism is essential to improving your skills in every aspect of object show production. Don't let criticism bring you down. Rather, use it as a tool to unlock your show's full potential. Just remember that absolutely no show is perfect and that you can always improve your show in any department of production. You just gotta hear people out sometimes.
A lot of us has a special skill, and it's all because of that fateful moment we first laid our glowy eyes on something incredible and made us say things like,
Wow, I want to make something like that.
Shush, sorry. But along the way, we often get a loop of burnouts, tight deadlines, comparing, and pressure from any individual around us. But what matters is jumping back to the moment you wanted to make something in the first place. That right there is one of your greatest strengths. So whenever work weighs you down, go back to that same moment that special something made you love to create things. Skills comes from practice, but your head and heart grows with wonder. Keep both alive.
Woo! Yeah! Next tip! So one of the coolest parts of the OSC is that it is in fact a community. So what's amazing about that is that you make your first object show video, you're really excited, you upload it to the internet, and immediately there's a large audience of object show fans who are excited to watch your video. Unfortunately, the consequence to that sometimes can be that your video is immediately being compared to other creators who sometimes have over 10 years under their belt making object show videos. So I want you to know that the hardest part of making an object show, period, is just starting it all. And sometimes you're gonna get criticism, and criticism can be a really good thing. People may say, oh, your animation could use a little bit of that, you might wanna work on this in your next video, but sometimes people are just trying to be a little mean and get under your skin and, you know, try to be a bit of a hater. So I wanna show you something right here. This is a stack of cups that I built. It took about, you know, I don't know, a minute to build. And it took about a second to take it down, and that is because trying to destroy something is a lot easier than trying to build something. Now, if you love it, if you love object shows and you want to make your own object show, just remember the love that brought it to you in the first place. You're going to get better as it goes along. Compare the first episode of Inanimate Insanity to the one that we released last month. You know, there's a big difference, but that isn't an accident. That is over a decade, 15 years of doing things over and over and failing and continue. But just know that making the first video is the hardest part, and you've already done it.
The most important thing that you have to do while you're making your show is to have